Welcome to Scam of the Week. We're on walkies today. Most people think of walkies as a thing you say to your dog. In fact, my dog right here looks like wanting to go for a walkie right at the moment. But it's also a term in the world of TV broadcasting. They have these things in TV and media like walkies, and the other one is noddies. Noddies is where you nod gravely and the cameraman cuts away from the subject of the interview saying incredibly important things to the interviewer going, very wise words. That's noddies, nodding, but walkies, well, that's next gen. Walkies is next level. This is where the camera guy says, okay, fellas, let's do walkies now. We're looking for an Elliot Ness look here. Strong law enforcement vibe. The Untouchables. Give us the Untouchables. And so they did this week. The boys have done a good walkies here. We applaud this walkies. There's no way Albo would look like this, taking his actual dog, Toto, for walkies with that sly grin, just casually photographed without his noticing. He wouldn't have that expression on his face. Would be more casual, but the real story here, of course, is about ASIO having foiled plots by hostile foreign nations to assassinate or harm critics in Australia. And that's when you invoke the serious walkies. As far as walkies go, this is pretty fine shot. There's a bit of movement, a bit of symmetry, where, with the pyramidic shape of the photograph. Moving forward, it's got action in it at the end of the day. Although Albo, if we can level any criticism at his walkie style, and sorry Albo, I want to do this to you, mate, but you've got to pull up your socks a little bit on the walkies. You're not meant to be smiling when you talk about NatSec. Albo's sort of giving that vibe. It's walkies time again. Oh no, all right, we've got to do walkies, got to do it. But Marky Dreyfus, on the right-hand side, Australia's Attorney General, well, he's got a slightly world-weary smile, denoting that look of, don't you know who I am? I didn't sign up for this walkies thing. But to Mark's credit, he's taken walkies in his stride. But then there is the pièce de résistance, Mikey Burgess, the chief of ASIO. Mikey Burgess is the Laurence Olivier of walkies. The spy boss from Central Casting, saving the world from Bond villains, from foreign unspecified terrorists. Look at that grim determination, that lanky stride, that curled lip, that furrowed brow. What's the scam here with this story? Because the photograph is magnificent, the walkies. Well, we don't know because ASIO's done something good. They say they have, but they won't identify what's going on because they can't. It's NatSec. They can't tell us. They've just done the photo. Bloody good photo, though, isn't it? Clive Palmer, of course, never hides his light under a bushel. He's more forthright. Not so big on the photos, but very big on the determination to channel Donald Trump. This week, Clive announced his new political party, Trumpets of Patriots. In fact, the image looks like bugles, not trumpets, but that's splitting hairs. The caper, Clive's caper, is to coalesce the minor parties of the right as a political force against the soft lefty coalition, Peter Dutton's mob, which still pay a little bit of homage to things like DEI and climate change, all that nonsense. So Clive wants to pull together the Libertarians, FON, which is Pauline Hanson's One Nation Network, and UAP. Draw together, coalesce these parties and drain that swamp. Doge it. Another contender for Scam of the Week is Australia's arts fraternity, because the entire arts fraternity in Australia has been scammed by a foreign war lobby. Now, the National Gallery of Australia has joined the government's arts body, Creative Australia, the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, Sydney Theatre Company, Sydney Uni and Macquarie Uni, and having its freedom of speech and expression curtailed by the Israel lobby. The arts community is absolutely up in arms a bit, as they should be. Australia's artists, well, the biggest scam here was when Creative Australia announced this Lebanese Australian artist, Khaled Sabsabi, and his curator, Michael D'Agostino. And it was announced that they were off to the Venice Biennale. Well, they ditched that. There was interference. They ditched these guys. It didn't matter about the arts. It's about somebody else's political views or feelings. 774 artists and art workers have signed an open letter demanding their reinstatement and for formal apologies to be issued. This is unprecedented in this country, in the arts world, the politicisation of it, and the directors and executive management of all these institutions are squarely to blame. They're the ones that make the decisions. Squarely to blame for caving in to lobbying and threats of funding cuts by supporters of Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. It is obsequious stuff. Oh, here we are. We'll just publish this for you. The related party transactions of the directors of Creative Australia, mostly government grants going to organisations with which they are associated. It's a gravy train. And in the jargon of accounting analysis using comparative related party transaction methodology, this is what is described as more related party transactions than a Greek wedding. We will know more this week because you see the National Gallery and Creative Australia have to front Senate estimates. There'll be some good questions in that one. But it's extraordinary that the response by Creative Australia was to launch an inquiry into their censorship saga, but the inquiry, its proposed terms, were not to inquire as to how this happened, this failure, this censorship. No, instead, they were inquiring into how this bloke, this Lebanese guy, whose views didn't align with theirs, this artist, how he got up in the first place, how him and D'Agostino were chosen. That's what the inquiry's into. Just bizarre stuff. Well, that beat off some other strong contenders. It's been a big week for scams. In the official state scams, it's hard to beat the pokies this week, where it was found that New South Wales gamblers are collectively dusting $1 million per minute in losses. The scam here is that a large chunk of these losses are profits for the New South Wales government budget, straight to the government budget. One of the biggest beneficiaries outside the clubs themselves, where they only spend about 3 or 4% giving back to the community. That's a furphy. We've done the numbers on that. Meanwhile, New South Wales Premier Chris Pokey Minns was busy at the Sky News Anti-Semitism Summit and passing tougher hate speech laws. Yes, more hate speech laws, more repression of free speech. This in the same week when actually people were harmed, where 2 Muslim women, 1 pregnant, were actually violently attacked on the street, physically attacked. We're not talking spray paint or nasty words, we're talking physical attacks. So they hold an anti-Semitism summit. Why not? The hapless knack backflipped on Robodebt. That was a big one, under relentless pressure from thousands of people on social media calling them useless. The courageous whistleblower Richard Boyle the tax office whistleblower refused a plea deal. You know what these plea deals are, where you say you're guilty, the authorities come to you and say, if you just want to plead guilty, we'll give you a slap on the wrist and, don't worry about doing the right thing. We'll let you off the hook as long as you say you're guilty. What sort of a deal is that? Well, it's the deal you take to stay out of jail, so he's still facing jail. So this is what acting on principle truly means. Richard Boyle, we should all support Richard. And calls for corporate welfare, and this is the Little Ripper. We're elevated to new heights with the Property Council of Australia, the big lobby group for property interests. It's calling on government to actually, this is corporate welfare platinum, to subsidise people's mortgages. Great move. Just as the banks, even in recent days, recorded incredibly strong profits, clean balance sheets, huge distributions, dividends, they're heading for a collective annual profit, not revenue, profit, net profit of $40 billion. Chuck in the Big Four and Suncorp, which is considered to be a minnow, a couple of billion there. The big hitters, meanwhile. The big hitters in our coalition were knocking the lights out as they do every week. Our perennial scam of the week contender, Jane Hume, was talking tax cuts, unfunded, of course. Nothing much is funded from the coalition. It's making it up as they go. And Angus Taylor was talking about how Australians deserved an interest rate hike.
Let me make a critical point about how we've got to where we are. Australian families have done the hard work here, and they deserve this interest rate increase because they're the ones that have done the work. To get interest rates down, demand has to come into balance with supply, and we've seen rapid growth in public demand, rapid growth in government spending, but indeed we've seen households tightening their belts. Households have had to tighten their belts because governments haven't tightened their belts.
Now let's just get that in perspective, because the Reserve Bank lowered interest rates this year for the first time in years. And Jim and Albo were talking dessert as well. How Australians deserve their cuts, their rate cuts, which they do, I suppose. I mean, deserve, is that the right word? But it was the first cut in years by the RBA as inflation came down. It was justified on the economic data. But good old coalition media found a way to bag it, to say it was bad news, with the Australian Rupert's mob saying it was a one-cut wonder. Jim Chalmers, the one-cut wonder boy. Is that the word churlish sort of springs to mind there? And the AFR, of course, so doctrinaire, the AFR, they said it was a political move, not an economic decision. In other words, the AFR's saying, good old Stutch, my old mate, saying that the Central Bank of Australia was not really independent at all, but was just doing Labor a favour before the election. There you go. Controversial, I would have thought. But Angus Taylor, good old Angus, he said, to quote Angus, the immortal words, he said that Australians deserve this interest rate increase. It was a cut. But somehow Angus had managed to lend that increased perspective to it. How a decrease becomes an increase, we don't know, but we could be being petty. Good one, Angus, well played. Without further ado, our scam of the week goes to, yes, Mikey Burgess, the ACO boss, because this is literally 2 or 3 decades of journalism, the greatest walkies we have ever seen. Not you guys on either side of him, bit players in Mike's walkies. He has ascended, Mike Burgess, to the pantheon of national honours for services to the arts, to the art of walkies.